Sometimes one note can silently change a child's entire life. He chooses a school in the loneliest hour of the night. No camera sees him, no hallway echoes his steps. Just one message, just one touch to a heart. No one knows his name, but every child who arrives early in the morning finds a miracle waiting. An old coat, a slightly hunched man, in one hand a rusty key, on his back a worn-out backpack filled with a notebook, some colored pencils, a few candies, and a purpose. He didn't choose the night. The night chose him. Nobody was expecting him there. But every night he chooses a school. No alarms go off. No guards ever see him, because he just leaves a note, just wants to leave a trace. To the child who sits at this desk, I know sometimes it feels like no one sees you, but someone did. You matter. It was the first night, but it wouldn't be the last. He doesn't wear a uniform. He doesn't have an ID. But every night, he enters schools as if they belong to him. Not to steal, not to vandalize, just to leave something behind. A piece of paper folded with care, left on an empty desk, like a secret message. He writes, "To the one who sits here, I see you. Even when no one else does, you matter. Next seat. Your smile can light up someone's darkest day. Another seat. If you ever feel invisible, remember, even stars shine alone in the sky." He never speaks, never stays long enough to be seen. But every morning, someone finds his words. A girl with tired eyes reads, "You are not just grades or rules. You are poetry yet to be written." A boy who always eats alone finds, "You don't need a crowd to be valuable." No cameras catch him, no teacher knows his name. But his messages ripple, changing mornings, changing moods, changing something deep. One morning, a teacher arrived earlier than usual. She noticed a folded note on her desk. It simply read, "Even grown-ups get tired. You're doing better than you think." She looked around. No footsteps, no shadows, just that quiet warmth. And then came the rumors. Some say he's a retired teacher. Some say a grieving father. Others think he's just someone who still believes in children. Some mornings the classroom air felt different, as if something kind had passed through the night before. A silence that wasn't empty, but full of something soft, like a blanket laid gently over every seat. The teachers started noticing. Fewer fights, fewer tears, a strange calm in the halls. One teacher stayed late one night just to see, just to witness the mystery. But when the janitor unlocked the door at sunrise, there was no sign of him. Just another note, taped gently to the window. It read, "You don't need to be loud to be heard." No name, no face, just a message. A whisper with weight, heavy enough to shift the hearts of children, and light enough to float between desks unnoticed. One student, normally silent, walked into class, sat down, and smiled for the first time in weeks. That day, the class didn't ask who wrote it. They didn't need to. Somehow, they already knew. One afternoon, the school principal found something unusual taped to her office door. It was a child's drawing, a stick figure with a large heart, and a cape made of paper notes. The caption, written in bold crayon, read, "The desk ghost is real." She smiled, but something tugged at her chest. Later that day, a mother called. She didn't ask about grades. She didn't complain. She just said, "My son, he's been different lately. He says someone sees him now. He even made his bed this morning. That's never happened." The ripple had begun. Some kids stayed behind after class, quietly placing their own sticky notes on other desks. Messages like, "I like your laugh," "You're good at drawing," "Thanks for sitting next to me yesterday." None of them signed their names. It was as if the presence of this unseen visitor had awakened something they didn't know they had. Kindness without condition. No one told them to do it, they just did. And every day, more desks held more light. Not from lamps or windows, but from words. Soft, brave, and written by tiny hands trying to keep the magic alive. One Friday evening, the janitor entered Class 2B earlier than usual. He bent down to collect a paper ball from under the last desk. But it wasn't trash. It was a folded letter, written in pencil, tear-stained and trembling. "Dear whoever leaves the notes, I wanted to disappear last week. But then I read yours. I waited until the next one and the next. I don't know who you are, but I think you saved me." He froze. All the empty classrooms, all the quiet footsteps, suddenly meant something more. This wasn't a hobby. This was hope. That night, for the first time, the man walked into the teacher's lounge and asked for a cup of tea. They looked surprised. He usually avoided eye contact, but something in his voice was different, as if carrying someone else's heartbeat. He didn't mention the notes. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. And the teachers, they started looking at the desks differently too. Like maybe they were more than just places to sit. Maybe they were bridges between invisible pain and invisible kindness. By Monday morning, someone had left a thermos on his desk. A sticky note on it read, "To the one who notices what others don't." He didn't know who left it, and he didn't ask, because something had already shifted. For the first time in years, someone had noticed him. Not the man who swept the floors, not the man who fixed flickering lights, but the man who left behind whispers of hope on colored paper. That evening he walked through the same hallway, but the silence felt warmer, as if the walls, once echoing only footsteps and fluorescent hums, were now filled with invisible thank yous. He paused by the art room. A child's painting was taped to the door, a single figure standing on a hill, arms stretched to the sky, papers flying from his hands like birds. He didn't need a signature. He knew what it meant. This wasn't just about notes anymore. It was about showing up for strangers, for forgotten kids, for the version of himself that once sat in the back row, hoping someone would care, and now he was becoming that someone. Tuesday morning, he arrived earlier than usual, but something was different. On 3 desks were notes, not his, different handwriting, different ink. "I sat here yesterday. You matter." To the next kid, "I know it's hard sometimes, but you're strong." "I don't know your name, but I believe in you." He stared at them for a long moment. Then he smiled. Hope was spreading, not because he asked, not because he taught, but because he showed up. Silently, consistently, a janitor in the hallway, a whisper in the dark. That day he skipped lunch. Instead, he walked the halls with a small notebook, jotting down names on lockers, smudges on windows, words half erased on bulletin boards. He was learning his school's heartbeat. Each forgotten corner had a story, and he was listening, not with his ears, but with something much older, maybe empathy, maybe pain, maybe a memory he hadn't dared to revisit. He once sat in a classroom too, a boy, small for his age, with eyes that wandered beyond the window long before the bell rang. His desk had no notes, no names written in margins, only silence, until one day a substitute teacher. She left a sticky note on every desk, but his said something different. You see the world in your own way. Don't ever lose that. He kept that note, folded it carefully, carried it through middle school, high school, life. Sometimes it crumpled in his wallet. Other times it sat taped inside a closet door. But always, it stayed with him. That note didn't fix his life, didn't erase pain, didn't stop him from making mistakes. But it reminded him, someone once saw me. And now he returned the favor, one child at a time. One day, a girl found his note. Her fingers trembled as she read it. You are stronger than the silence around you. She tucked it into her diary, between pages stained with quiet tears. That day, she chose not to disappear. Another boy found a note beneath his pencil case. It read, Your mind matters. Your voice matters. You matter. He read it twice, then again, and again. That morning, he raised his hand in class. For the first time, none of them knew who left the notes, but something in them shifted, a light, faint but present, like someone somewhere was watching them, not to judge, but to remind them they weren't invisible. Because sometimes the loudest help comes from the quietest hands. He never spoke of his own childhood, but some nights he walked slower in the art rooms. His fingers brushed the old paint-stained tables like they held unspoken memories. There he once sat too, a quiet boy who waited for someone to say, You don't have to be loud to be seen. But no one did. So now he becomes that voice for others. Each note he leaves is a sentence he once needed to hear but never did. To the child sitting here today, you matter more than you think. And somehow, writing it down for them, he writes it for himself, too. One morning he arrived earlier than usual. The halls still whispered sleep, but a door creaked open. A boy, half asleep, backpack dragging. They locked eyes just for a second. The man smiled. The boy blinked, confused, curious. Then, a small nod. He didn't speak, neither did the boy, but something passed between them, something louder than words. The next day there was a second note on that desk. This time it read, You're braver than your silence, and taped beneath it, a tiny paper crane, folded with hands that once trembled. He wasn't just leaving notes anymore. He was being seen. That night he sat on the school steps. Same coat, same bag, but his eyes, they wandered further than the walls around him. In his hand, a worn photo, edges frayed, colors fading, a little girl, hair in messy pigtails, smiling with missing teeth. He whispered something, almost like a prayer, a name, too soft to catch. Then he tucked it back into his coat pocket next to a tiny toy spoon and stood up. The janitor, walking by, paused. Forgot something? He just shook his head, smiled. No, just remembering something. He never spoke of his own childhood, but some nights he walked slower in the art rooms. His fingers brushed the old paint-stained tables like they held unspoken memories. There he once sat too, a quiet boy who waited for someone to say, You don't have to be loud to be seen. But no one did. So now he becomes that voice for others. Each note he leaves is a sentence he once needed to hear but never did. To the child sitting here today, you matter more than you think. And somehow, writing it down for them, he writes it for himself, too. One morning he arrived earlier than usual. The halls still whispered sleep, but a door creaked open. A boy, half asleep, backpack dragging. They locked eyes. Just for a second. The man smiled. The boy blinked, confused, curious. Then, a small nod. He didn't speak. Neither did the boy, but something passed between them. something louder than words. The next day, there was a second note on that desk. This time, it read, "You're braver than your silence," and taped beneath it, a tiny paper crane, folded with hands that once trembled. He wasn't just leaving notes anymore. He was being seen. That night he sat on the school steps, same coat, same bag, but his eyes, they wandered further than the walls around him. In his hand, a worn photo, edges frayed, colors fading, a little girl, hair in messy pigtails, smiling with missing teeth. He whispered something, almost like a prayer, a name, too soft to catch. Then he tucked it back into his coat pocket next to a tiny toy spoon and stood up. The janitor, walking by, paused. "Forgot something?" He just shook his head, smiled. "No, just remembering something." The school's security cameras still had no answers, but that morning a teacher claimed to have seen him. "Like a shadow," she whispered. "I didn't see his face, but I noticed the thermos and that old, worn notebook." Later that day, a student found a new kind of note. It wasn't like the others. Folded gently, placed on the desk with care. "One day you'll carry this notebook forward. I already know you will." At the bottom, drawn in crayon, was a single star, just like the ones from the very first night. That afternoon, the principal made an announcement. "A notebook has been found in the hallway. Its pages are blank, but on the cover it simply says, 'It's your turn.'" Students began writing. No names, no grades, just truths, just hope. "Today someone saw me. Someone noticed I was crying. I want to leave a note for someone else." Weeks passed. The man never returned. No footage, no trace. But the notebook traveled to other schools, other desks, each page filled by a new child, then passed on, quietly, faithfully. It became a ritual, a silent movement. One morning, an old jacket was found hanging on the school gate. Inside the pocket, a folded paper. "I'm leaving now. But there are hundreds of pens in my place, each one held by a child, each one learning how to leave a gentle mark." Years later, an interview aired. A teacher sitting in a quiet classroom smiled and said, "I was one of those kids, the first to find a note, and now I leave notes every morning for my students. Maybe one day, one of them will do the same." She turned to the board, picked up a white piece of chalk, and wrote, "Some marks never fade." There was a man. He wasn't alone, just quiet. He left a mark, and that mark touched thousands. He never wanted to be seen. He never signed a single note. He never said who he was or why he did it. But every classroom he visited, every desk he touched, carried a piece of him, a whisper of presence, a trace of silent care. He didn't seek recognition. He wasn't chasing a headline. He was simply leaving something behind, something this world forgets all too often. Kindness, quiet, invisible, inconvenient kindness. The kind that doesn't need a witness. The kind that shows up when no one else does. Sometimes it was just one sentence. "Someone believes in you. Your tears matter. Even shadows prove there is light." And somehow those scribbled words, no matter how short, became lifelines for the kid sitting alone, for the one thinking of giving up, for the one who stopped hoping anyone saw them. He wasn't just leaving notes. He was planting reasons to keep going, and maybe he'll never know how many lives he gently pushed back from the edge. Maybe he'll never see the faces of the kids he saved. But we see them, we hear them, and we remember him. So now, you're here. You stayed with this story. and maybe, just maybe, a part of you was changed. So let me ask you something. Who are you being invisible kindness for? Who in your life needs a note you haven't written yet? Because sometimes all it takes is one act no one sees to save someone who thinks no one cares. If this story stirred something inside you, leave a comment. Tell us about a time someone showed up for you quietly, or the moment you chose to leave a note, even when no one would know it was you. Share this story with someone who might be sitting at their own desk right now, wondering if they matter. And if these stories remind you that empathy, kindness, and quiet bravery still exist, subscribe. Because here we don't just tell stories, we remind the world that we're still human. And if you're still here, it means you felt it too. You felt the silence between the words. You saw the child behind the desk. You recognized the man behind the note. Because maybe once you were that child. Or maybe you're becoming that man. In a world obsessed with noise, he chose to whisper, and that whisper became a rescue. So if this story left a mark, don't let it stop here. Carry it, pass it on. Be someone's quiet reason to believe, because the most powerful acts don't need a stage. They just need you.